The snow fell in thick, silent curtains over Wilkinsburg, a working-class neighborhood on the eastern edge of Pittsburgh, where the row houses stood shoulder to shoulder like old soldiers who'd fought the same wars. Robert Hayes sat in his idling Ford F-150, the heater blowing warm air that did nothing to thaw the cold knot forming in his chest. On the passenger seat sat 3 carefully wrapped boxes, a bright red fire truck for his grandson Ethan, still in its packaging with a bow he'd tied, himself, a cashmere scarf for Caroline in a shade of cream he hoped she'd like, and for Michael, a vintage Steelers cap from the 1970s, the kind they used to wear together on Sundays when the world felt simpler, and Sunday meant football, beer, and laughter that came easy. Robert was 62 years old, with calloused hands that had built half the houses in this city, and a heart that had been slowly breaking since Linda died 5 years ago from pancreatic cancer. His wife had been the glue that held everything together, the peacemaker, the bridge between father and son, the woman who could make a meal from nothing and a home from anywhere. Without her, the distance between him and Michael had grown quietly, inevitably, like rust on iron left out in the rain. He killed the engine and stepped out into the December cold. His boots crunched through the fresh snow as he walked up the driveway of Michael's house, a pristine 2-story colonial in Fox Chapel, one of those suburbs where the lawns were always professionally maintained and the neighbors drove Mercedes SUVs. The kind of place Robert had built with his own hands for other families but never owned himself, never could afford. Through the bay windows, he could see the Christmas tree, enormous, at least 9 feet tall, perfectly decorated with white lights and silver ornaments that probably cost more than his monthly pension. Shadows moved inside. Laughter echoed faintly through the double-paned glass. Robert climbed the steps, his heart heavy with hope and dread, and knocked on the door with its brass knocker shaped like a pineapple, the symbol of hospitality he'd once read. The door opened, and there stood Michael, 34 years old, clean-shaven, his dark hair styled with product, wearing a navy cardigan over a crisp white shirt that probably cost more than Robert's weekly grocery bill. His son's face shifted, just slightly, almost imperceptibly, when he saw his father standing there in his Carhartt work jacket and worn jeans. "Dad," Michael said. His voice was flat, not warm, not cold, just careful, measured. "Merry Christmas, son." Robert held up the boxes, forcing a smile that felt fragile on his weathered face. "Thought I'd drop these off before the holiday. Ethan around. I got him something I think he'll love. Been looking for this fire truck for weeks." Michael didn't move from the doorway. Behind him, Robert could see into the living room, Caroline's mother, Patricia, sitting elegantly on the cream-colored sofa with a wineglass in her perfectly manicured hand, her blonde hair styled in a way that probably required a salon appointment. Her father, Gerald, stood by the marble fireplace in a cashmere sweater, gesturing with his own wineglass as he told some story. Everything looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Everything was perfect. There was no space for a man in work boots and a Carhartt jacket who smelled faintly of sawdust. "Dad, listen." Michael lowered his voice and stepped onto the porch, pulling the door half-closed behind him. The cold hit them both, but Michael didn't seem to notice. "This year we're doing Christmas with Caroline's family, just keeping it simple, intimate. You understand, right? If this story is pulling you in from the very first moment, consider subscribing to support this channel. Stories like this take time, heart, and care to create." Robert felt something crack inside his chest, like ice breaking on the Allegheny River. "I drove 40 minutes in the snow, Michael, through a damn blizzard. The roads are barely plowed. I know, I'm sorry, I should have called." Michael glanced back inside, then looked at his father with eyes that couldn't quite meet his. "It's just, Caroline's parents are here and her sister flew in from Boston, and it's already a full house. We'll do something next week, okay? Just you, me, and Ethan. Father-son time. Maybe go to that diner you like on Penn Avenue." Robert stared at his son, really, looked at him, and wondered when Michael had become someone he didn't recognize. When had his boy, the kid who used to climb onto his shoulders at construction sites and wear his hard hat like a crown, who used to help him sand furniture in the garage while listening to Springsteen, turned into this polished stranger who spoke in corporate buzzwords and whose smile never quite reached his eyes? "Next week," Robert repeated quietly, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "Yeah, I promise, Dad. I'll text you. We'll set something up, I swear." But they both knew what Michael's promises had meant lately. Empty words, polite deflections, good intentions that never materialized into actual plans. Robert handed over the boxes. Michael took them without looking inside, without asking what was in them, without the curiosity or warmth that used to define him. Just accepted them like he was signing for a package from Amazon. "Thanks, Dad. I appreciate it, really. I'll make sure Ethan gets his gift. He'll love it, I'm sure." "Tell him Grandpa loves him," Robert said, his voice rough. "I will. Merry Christmas, Dad." The door closed, not slammed. Michael was too polite for that, too well trained in the social graces of Caroline's world. Just closed, gently, firmly, like shutting out a cold draft or an unwanted solicitor. Robert stood on the porch for a long moment, snow gathering on his shoulders, melting into his grey hair, staring at the wreath on the door with its perfect red bow. And artificial berries. Inside, someone laughed, high and bright and carefree. A champagne cork popped, followed by applause. He turned and walked back to his truck, his boots leaving lonely tracks in the fresh snow, like evidence of a man who'd been there and been turned away. The drive home was a blur of brake lights and Christmas decorations. Houses lit up with colorful lights, inflatable Santas on lawns, families visible through windows, gathering around dinner tables. Robert didn't remember stopping at red lights or turning onto his street. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory guiding him home while his mind replayed Michael's face, that careful expression, those empty words. He parked in front of his narrow row house, the one he'd shared with Linda for 30 years, where they'd raised Michael, where every room held memories, and sat in the cold cab, hands still gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The house was dark. He'd left the porch light off. No reason to waste electricity when no one was coming. No reason to pretend this was a home that people visited. Inside, the silence was deafening. The small Christmas tree he'd bought from the grocery store lot, a scraggly thing the lot attendant had practically given him out of pity, sat in the corner unlit, slightly crooked in its stand. He didn't bother plugging it in. He just poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey from the bottle Linda had bought him for their last Christmas together, sat in his recliner, the one she used to say was uglier than sin but comfortable as heaven, and stared at the empty space where her chair used to be before he'd finally donated it to Goodwill last year, because looking at it, empty, hurt too much. On the mantel sat their wedding photo, the frame dusty, Linda in her simple white dress from JCPenney, him in a rented suit that didn't quite fit, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. Next to it, a photo of Michael as a boy, maybe 7 or 8, missing his 2 front teeth, holding up a bass they'd caught together at Lake Erie, the fish almost as big as he was. "Maybe next time," Michael had said. Robert closed his eyes and took a long drink, the whiskey burning his throat. There wouldn't be a next time. He could feel it in his bones, in the way Michael's voice had sounded, distant, distracted, like Robert was an obligation to be managed rather than a father to be loved. The tears came then, hot and unexpected, sliding down his weathered cheeks into his grey beard. "Merry Christmas." Michael closed the door and stood in the foyer for a long moment, his father's gifts heavy in his hands, heavier than their actual weight, heavy with guilt and implications and everything he couldn't let himself feel right now. Through the archway, he could hear Patricia's laugh, that carefully cultivated sound like wind chimes, pitched perfectly to convey delight without actual joy. "Was that your father?" Caroline appeared. Beside him, her voice low and sharp as a knife. She wore a burgundy dress that hugged her slim figure, her blonde hair pulled back in a style that had probably taken an hour to achieve, but looked effortlessly elegant. "Yeah. You didn't invite him in?" There was an edge to her question, an accusation wrapped in inquiry. "You said it was too crowded," Michael replied, setting the boxes on the hall table next to a vase of fresh orchids that probably cost $100 and would be dead in a week. Caroline's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. "I said we were keeping it intimate. I didn't say to turn your own father away at the door like some door-to-door salesman." Michael looked at her. Even upset, she was beautiful. She'd always be beautiful in that polished, untouchable way, but lately when he looked at her, all he saw was the distance between them, the vast gulf of everything they couldn't say to each other. "You've been complaining for weeks about how overwhelming the holidays are with both families," Michael said, his voice flat. "About how stressed you are, about how you can't handle the drama. I was trying to help. I was trying to make things easier for you." "By shutting out your own father?" By treating him like he's an inconvenience? She shook her head, something like disappointment or maybe disgust flickering across her face. Do you even hear yourself anymore, Michael? Do you recognize who you've become? Before he could respond, before he could formulate a defense or an apology or any words at all, Patricia's voice rang out from the living room like a summons from royalty. Caroline, darling, come help with the cheese board. Gerald can't tell brie from camembert, and you know how particular I am about presentation. Caroline gave Michael one last look, something between pity and anger and resignation, and walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor like a countdown. Michael stood alone in the foyer, his father's gifts staring, back at him like an accusation, like witnesses to his cowardice. Dinner was catered by some exclusive service Patricia had insisted on: Chilean sea bass with a citrus glaze, roasted Brussels sprouts with pancetta and balsamic reduction, a winter salad with pomegranate seeds that looked like rubies scattered on white china. Everything was plated like art. Everything was perfect. Everything was always perfect in Caroline's world, in this life he'd built that felt more like a prison than a palace. Patricia dominated the conversation, as she always did, her voice carrying through the dining room as she talked about their upcoming ski trip to Aspen, the new membership at Oakmont Country Club that had a waiting list 5 years long, the renovation plans for their summer house in the Hamptons, where they'd spent 2 weeks last August. The contractor says the new master suite will be finished by June, she announced, as if this was news of national importance. Floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the ocean. It's going to be absolutely divine. Gerald mostly nodded and refilled his wine glass, occasionally interjecting with comments about the stock market or his golf handicap or some business deal he'd closed. Caroline's sister, Amanda, fresh off a plane from Boston, where she worked as a corporate lawyer at some white shoe firm, talked about her recent promotion to partner and her boyfriend, who was absolutely brilliant. Harvard MBA, you know. His family has a compound in Martha's Vineyard. Michael smiled and laughed at the right moments, made the appropriate comments about how wonderful everything was, played his part in this elaborate performance. But inside, something was unraveling like a sweater with a loose thread that, once pulled, would destroy the entire garment. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again, insistent. "Excuse me," he said, standing from the table. "Work email. I should check it." He stepped into the study, the one room in this house that was supposed to be his but felt like borrowed space, and pulled out his phone. 2 texts from his boss, Richard. "Need to talk Monday. Important. Call me when you get a chance, sooner rather than later. Not good news." Michael's stomach dropped like a stone thrown into deep water. He'd been dreading this for weeks, seeing the signs. The closed-door meetings he wasn't invited to, the way Richard avoided eye contact in the hallways, the whispers that stopped when he walked into a room. The regional manager position he'd been promised, the one he'd worked 80-hour weeks for, the one he'd sacrificed evenings with Ethan for, mornings with Caroline, dinners with his father, the one that was supposed to prove he belonged in this world of country clubs and summer homes, had gone to someone else. He'd heard the rumors, seen David Jenkins's smug face, known deep down that he'd lost. Now it was real. He sat down at the desk, head in his hands, and tried to breathe through the rising panic. When had everything become so hard? When had his life turned into this endless performance, where he was always one step behind, always reaching for something just out of grasp, always not quite good enough despite every sacrifice? He thought about his father standing on the porch in the snow, holding those boxes, the hurt in his eyes that he'd tried to hide, but Robert Hayes had never been good at hiding his feelings. That was the difference between their worlds. Michael's knew. World valued the mask, the performance, the careful control of emotion. His father's world valued honesty even when it hurt. Michael squeezed his eyes shut, his chest tight. "Not now. I'll deal with it later. I'll make it right with Dad. I'll fix the job situation, I'll fix my marriage, I'll fix everything." But a quiet voice in the back of his mind whispered, "When? When will you make it right? When will later come? How many times have you said this before?" He didn't have an answer. The door opened. Caroline stood there, backlit by the hallway light. "You okay?" she asked, but her voice was distant, perfunctory, like she was asking because she should, not because she wanted to know. "Yeah, fine. Just work stuff. We should get back. Your mother-in-law is asking about you." Your mother-in-law? Not Patricia. Not my mother. Your mother-in-law. Like even Caroline was drawing lines now, establishing distance. Michael stood, straightened his cardigan, put on his smile, and followed his wife back to the dining room where he'd pretend everything was fine, because that's what he did now. Pretend. Monday morning arrived with the weight of an executioner's blade. Michael sat across from Richard in the glass-walled conference room on the 15th floor of the PPG Place Tower, the Pittsburgh skyline stretching out behind them, the three rivers converging, the bridges like silver threads connecting neighborhoods, the city gray and cold under January clouds that promised more snow. Richard was 50-something, silver-haired, tan from a recent vacation in Turks and Caicos, with the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about money, from a life where doors opened because of your name rather than your work. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Michael, I'm going to be straight with you because I think you deserve that, and I've always appreciated your work ethic." He folded his hands on the mahogany table. The regional manager position went to David. "Jenkins." Michael felt the words hit him like a physical blow, even though he'd known they were coming. Why? The executive team felt he was a better cultural fit for leadership at this level. Cultural fit? Michael's voice cracked slightly, and he hated himself for it, hated the vulnerability it revealed. "Richard, I've been with this company for 8 years. I've closed more deals than anyone in my division. My numbers are consistently in the top 5%. I've brought in 3 major accounts this year alone. Your numbers are excellent," Richard interrupted, his tone that of a patient parent explaining something to a slow child. "You're a phenomenal salesman, Michael. One of the best we have. Your work ethic is beyond reproach. But leadership is about more than numbers. It's about presence, relationships, vision. It's about who you know and how you present yourself in certain circles." He paused, took a sip from his coffee mug that probably cost $50. Jenkins went to Wharton. His father-in-law sits on the board of directors at Mellon Bank. He summers in Martha's Vineyard with half our client list. He plays golf at clubs where deals get made on the 9th hole. That's the reality of business at this level. "So it's about connections," Michael said, his voice flat now, dead. "Not merit, not work, just who your family is. It's about everything." Richard leaned back in his leather chair. "Look, you're still incredibly valuable here. This isn't a demotion. Your position is secure, your salary stays the same. But if you want to move up in this organization, you need to think bigger, network more strategically, join the right clubs. Maybe consider getting an MBA from a top-tier school. Columbia has an excellent executive program. I could write you a recommendation." Michael left the office 20 minutes later in a complete daze. An MBA, more debt. Debt piled on top of the mortgage on a house he could barely afford, the private. Preschool tuition for Ethan that cost more than some people's rent. The country club membership. Caroline insisted they needed to maintain appearances. The car payments, the life insurance, the carefully curated existence that was crushing him. More years of proving himself, more years of being not quite good enough, not quite the right pedigree, not quite worthy of the world he was trying so desperately to belong to. He sat in his BMW, leased, not owned, in the parking garage, staring at the concrete wall, and felt something break inside him, not dramatically, just quietly, like a rope fraying until the last thread snaps. His phone buzzed. "Caroline, can you pick up Ethan from daycare? I have a terrible migraine. Can't drive. Please don't make me ask twice." He texted back with numb fingers. "On my way." Ethan was 4 years old, with Michael's dark hair and Linda's bright eyes. Eyes that saw everything, that hadn't learned yet to hide what they felt, to perform emotions instead of feeling them. He ran into Michael's arms when he arrived at Little Sprouts daycare, clutching a construction paper snowman with a crooked smile and button eyes. "Daddy, look what I made! Miss Jennifer said it's beautiful. She said I'm the best artist in the whole class." Michael forced a smile, lifting his son into his arms, breathing in that perfect child smell of apple shampoo and graham crackers and innocence. "That's amazing, buddy. That's the best snowman I've ever seen. We'll put it on the fridge when we get home. Right next to the drawing I made of you and me and Mommy and Grandpa Robert." Michael's chest tightened painfully. "Yeah, right next to it." On the drive home, Ethan chatted endlessly about his day, about his friend Liam, who could count to 100, about the story Miss Jennifer read about a bear who was afraid of the dark, but learned to be brave, about how he wanted a puppy for his birthday, and could they please get one. Michael nodded, made the appropriate sounds of interest and encouragement, but his mind was spinning. Numbers, promotions, debt. Caroline's disappointed face, his father standing in the snow, the look in Robert's eyes when the door closed, the way his own life had become unrecognizable. When they got home to the perfect house in the perfect neighborhood, Caroline was lying in the darkened bedroom, an arm draped over her eyes, still in her yoga clothes from the morning class she took at the expensive studio downtown. "How was work?" she asked flatly, not moving. "Fine," Michael lied, the word automatic now. She didn't press, didn't ask follow-up questions, didn't notice that her husband was dying inside. Just lay there in the darkness of their expensive bedroom with its king-size bed and high thread-count sheets. Michael made Ethan mac and cheese from a box, the kind with the neon orange powder that Linda used to say was pure poison, but that Ethan loved with the uncomplicated passion only children possess, and they ate together at the kitchen island, while Ethan told him about a game they played at school called Duck, Duck, Goose, that Michael pretended not to know, so Ethan could explain all the rules with great seriousness. After dinner, he read Ethan 3 stories: Goodnight Moon, Where the Wild Things Are, and The Giving Tree, which always made Michael's throat tight, and tucked him into bed under the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "I love you, Daddy," Ethan whispered, already half asleep, his small hand holding Michael's finger. "I love you too, buddy. More than anything in the whole world, more than all the stars. Even more than the Steelers?" Michael laughed, the first genuine sound he'd made all day. Even more than the Steelers. When Michael came back downstairs, Caroline was on the couch scrolling through her phone, the blue light illuminating her face in the dim living room. "Your mother called," she said without looking up. "She wants us to come to their New Year's Eve party at the club, black tie. She's already bought tickets." "Okay. Are you going to invite your father?" Michael's jaw tightened. "I don't know. Maybe. Probably not. It's not really his scene. He'd be uncomfortable." "Or you'd be uncomfortable," Caroline said, finally looking at him. "Having your father there around my family, because he doesn't fit the image you're trying to project. If you've made it this far, drop a comment with your thoughts. It really helps the channel grow." "That's not fair, isn't it?" Her voice was sharp now, cutting. "What's going on with you, Michael? And don't say nothing. Don't lie to me. You've been different for months. Distant. Like you're not even here. Like you're going through the motions of life, but not actually living." He wanted to tell her everything. About the promotion that slipped through his fingers like water. About the suffocating weight of trying to be enough for her family. For this life. For the version of himself he'd constructed. From whole cloth. About how every day he felt like he was drowning in a life that looked perfect from the outside, but felt hollow and brittle on the inside, like a beautiful vase that was actually made of paper-thin glass. About how he'd pushed away the one person who'd always loved him unconditionally, and how that choice was eating him alive. But instead he said, "I'm fine, just work stress. End-of-year quotas. It'll pass. After the holidays." "If you say so," Caroline said, but her tone made it clear she didn't believe him. She turned back to her phone. Michael went upstairs, closed the bathroom door, locked it, and sat on the floor with his back against the tub. In the mirror across from him, he could see his reflection, a stranger in an expensive shirt from Brooks Brothers, with tired eyes and a smile that no longer reached them, a man who'd traded authenticity for acceptance and found neither. And for the first time in years, Michael Hayes, successful salesman, dutiful husband, perfect son-in-law, provider, pretender, cried, not the quiet tears from Christmas Eve, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook his entire body, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through the carefully constructed dam. He cried for his father, for his marriage, for his son, for the man he used to be, for the life he'd lost while chasing someone else's dream. And when the tears finally stopped, when he'd cried himself empty, he looked in the mirror at his red-rimmed eyes and made a decision. Tomorrow he'd figure something out. Tomorrow he'd start fixing things. Tomorrow. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, Michael's life completely fell apart. He was driving to work, running late because Ethan had thrown a tantrum about wearing shoes, when his phone rang. Caroline. He answered via Bluetooth. "Michael, I need to tell you something." Her voice was strange, flat, rehearsed. "What's wrong? Is Ethan okay?" "Ethan's fine. I'm fine. Physically, but..." She paused. "I can't do this anymore. I'm taking Ethan to my parents' house. I've already packed bags for both of us. I need space. I need time to think." Michael's hands tightened on the wheel. "What? Caroline, what are you talking about?" Can we discuss this when I get home tonight? There's nothing to discuss. I've been trying to reach you for months, Michael. The real you. But you're not there. You're this hollow version of yourself, and I don't know who you are anymore. I don't know if I ever really knew you, or if the man I fell in love with was just another performance. That's not fair, isn't it? Her voice broke. You pushed away your father because he didn't fit the image you wanted. You work yourself to death for a company that doesn't value you. You barely spend time with your son. You look at me like I'm a stranger. You're drowning, Michael, and you won't let anyone help you. So I'm done. I'm taking our son, and I'm leaving. Caroline, please. My lawyer will be in touch. About custody arrangements. The line went dead. Michael pulled over on the side of Route 28, cars whipping past him, and stared at the phone in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But it was. He didn't go to work. He turned the car around and sped home, breaking every traffic law, praying he could catch Caroline before she left, that he could fix this, that he could say the right words to make her stay. But when he burst through the door, the house was empty, silent. Half of Ethan's room was cleared out, his favorite stuffed animals gone, his clothes missing from drawers. In the master bedroom, Caroline's closet was half empty. Her toiletries were gone from the bathroom. On the kitchen counter sat a single piece of paper, a note in Caroline's precise handwriting. Michael, I hope you find yourself again. For Ethan's sake, maybe for yours, but I can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. I've tried. I'm done trying. See. Michael crumpled the note in his fist, then slid down the kitchen cabinet to the floor, the expensive tile cold beneath him. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard. Where are you? We have the quarterly meeting in 20 minutes. This is unacceptable. Michael stared at the text and felt nothing. He didn't care about the meeting, didn't care about the job, didn't care about any of it. He'd lost everything that mattered. His wife, his son, his self-respect, and the one person he'd pushed furthest away, his father, was probably the only person who might still love him. But Michael had burned that bridge, closed that door, on Christmas Eve in the snow, with gifts and hope that he'd casually destroyed. He sat on the kitchen floor of his empty, perfect house and finally understood what he'd done. That evening, Michael did something he hadn't done in months. He drove to his father's house in Wilkinsburg. The row house looked smaller than he remembered, more worn, but the porch light was on. Robert always kept it on now, just in case, and smoke rose from the chimney. Michael sat in his car for 10 minutes trying to find the courage to knock. Finally, he got out and walked to the door. He knocked. Footsteps. The door opened. Robert stood there in flannel and jeans, a Steelers cap on his head, and his face registered complete shock. Michael! Dad, Michael's voice broke. I messed up. I messed everything up. Caroline left me. She took Ethan. My marriage is over. My job is falling apart. Everything I built is gone. And I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. Robert stared at his son for a long moment. Then he stepped aside and opened the door wider. Come inside, son. You're home. Michael walked into his father's house and, for the first time in months, felt like he could breathe. The first night at his father's house, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay in his old twin bed, staring at the ceiling with its water stain that looked like a map of Italy, listening to the house settle around him. The creak of old wood, the hum of the furnace, his father's gentle snoring from the room next door. Everything felt surreal, like he'd somehow slipped sideways into a different life. Just yesterday morning, he'd woken up in a king-size bed in Fox Chapel. Now he was in Wilkinsburg, in a room that hadn't changed since he was a teenager, surrounded by faded Steelers posters and a bookshelf full of books he'd read in high school. His phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. No texts from Caroline, no calls, nothing. He'd tried calling her 6 times. She'd blocked his number. Around 2 a.m. he heard movement downstairs. He got up and found his father in the kitchen, making hot chocolate the old-fashioned way, milk in a saucepan, real cocoa powder, a splash of vanilla. Couldn't sleep either, Robert asked, not turning around. No. Pull up a chair. They sat at the small kitchen table, the same one Michael had eaten breakfast at every morning for 18 years, and drank hot chocolate in silence. Finally, Robert spoke. You want to talk about it? I don't even know where to start, Dad. Start anywhere. I've got time. So Michael talked. He told his father everything, about the promotion that went to someone with better connections, about the debt, about Caroline's unhappiness, about how he'd been trying so hard to be someone he wasn't that he'd lost sight of who he actually was, about how ashamed he'd been, about how he'd thought if he could just achieve enough, earn enough, impress the right people, he'd finally feel like he mattered. About Christmas Eve, about closing the door on his father, and how that moment had haunted him every single day since. Robert listened without interrupting, his weathered hands wrapped around his mug. When Michael finished, his voice hoarse from talking, Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know what your mother used to tell me? She'd say, 'Robert, you can't build a house on sand. You need a solid foundation, or the whole thing collapses.'" He looked at his son. "You tried to build your life on what other people thought you should be. That's sand, Michael. It was always going to collapse. The only foundation that lasts is knowing who you are and being okay with that. Your mother knew that. I know that. And somewhere deep down, you know it too. I don't know who I am anymore, Dad. Then we'll figure it out. Together, like we should have been doing all along." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. For Christmas. For pushing you away. For being ashamed of where I came from. For—" "Stop," Robert said firmly. "I forgive you. I forgave you the moment that door closed, because that's what fathers do. We love our kids even when they hurt us, even when they forget us, even when they're lost." He reached across the table and squeezed Michael's hand. "You're my son. Nothing changes that. Not distance, not time, not mistakes, nothing." Michael broke down completely then, and Robert came around the table and held him while he cried, the way he used to when Michael was small and had nightmares. "It's okay," Robert murmured. "You're home now. You're safe. We'll figure it out." And in that moment, in his father's arms, Michael finally stopped pretending everything was fine. He let himself break, because sometimes you have to fall completely apart before you can put yourself back together. The next morning, Michael's phone rang. His boss, Richard, he almost didn't answer, but habit and fear made him pick up. "Michael, where the hell have you been? You missed the quarterly meeting, you haven't responded to emails, and—" "I quit," Michael said. Silence. "Excuse me? I quit. I'm done. I'm not coming back." "Michael, be reasonable. You're upset. Take a few days. We can talk about—" "There's nothing to talk about. I'm done performing. I'm done pretending. Send me whatever paperwork I need to sign." He hung up. His father, making eggs at the stove, turned around. "You sure about that?" "No," Michael admitted, "but I'm sure I can't keep doing what I was doing. That job was killing me." Robert nodded. "Then you made the right choice. Everything else we can figure out." Over the next week, Michael barely left the house. He stayed in his room mostly, staring at his phone, waiting for Caroline to call. She didn't. Her lawyer sent papers, cold legal documents about custody arrangements, visitation schedules, asset division. Michael read them sitting at his father's kitchen table and felt like he was reading about someone else's life. Robert didn't push him, just existed around him, making simple meals, leaving food outside his door when Michael didn't emerge, checking in with gentle questions that required only yes or no answers. On the 8th day, Robert came into Michael's room and tossed a pair of work gloves onto the bed. "Come on." "Where?" "Garage. You're not sitting in this room another day. Time to move." Michael wanted to argue, to say he wasn't ready, that he just needed more time to process, to figure things out. But something in his father's face, firm but loving, made him get up and follow. In the garage, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and motor oil, Robert had a half-finished wooden toy chest sitting on the workbench, beautiful even in its incomplete state, dovetail joints perfectly fitted, smooth maple wood, the kind of craftsmanship that took time and care. "What's this for?" Michael asked. "Ethan, for when you see him again." Michael's chest tightened. "Dad, I don't even know when that'll be. Caroline won't answer my calls. Her lawyer is talking about supervised visitation pending evaluation, like I'm some kind of danger to my own son. I don't know if—" "Stop," Robert interrupted firmly. "You will see him again, and when you do, you'll have something to give him that's made with your own hands. Something real, something that matters." He handed Michael a piece of sandpaper. "Start with the edges. Smooth even. Strokes. Like I taught you when you were 10 years old." Michael took the sandpaper, his hands remembering the motion even after all these years. They worked in silence for a long while, the rhythmic sound of sanding filling the cold garage. It was meditative, grounding, the first thing that had felt real in months. "I really screwed up, didn't I?" Michael said quietly. Robert paused his work. "You made mistakes. We all do. The question isn't whether you screwed up, it's what you do now." "I don't know what to do." "You start by being honest. With Caroline, with yourself, with me. You stop running from the people who love you. You stop pretending to be someone you're not. He looked at his son. And you start building a life that's actually yours. Not the life Caroline's family wanted. Not the life you thought you should have. The life that makes you feel like yourself. I don't even know what that looks like. Then we'll figure it out, one piece at a time, just like this chest. Michael nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. They kept working, together. And slowly, grain by grain, stroke by stroke, Michael began to understand that rebuilding wasn't just about the chest. It was about himself. 3 weeks after Caroline left, Michael received a text. Ethan has been asking about you constantly. You can see him this Saturday. 10 a.m. my parents' house. 1 hour. I'll be there the whole time. Michael read the message 5 times, his hands shaking. He immediately called his father at work. Robert answered on the second ring. She's letting me see him, Dad, Saturday. That's good, son. Robert's voice was warm with relief. That's real good. But what if he's angry? What if he doesn't understand why I left? What if he thinks I abandoned him? What if... Michael, Robert's voice was firm. Stop spiraling. He's 4 years old. He's not angry. He's confused, and he misses his daddy. You show up. You be present. You be honest in a way. He can understand. That's all you can do. What do I say? The truth, that you made mistakes, that mommy and daddy are figuring things out, that you love him more than anything. Kids don't need perfect parents. They need real ones. Saturday morning arrived too fast and too slow simultaneously. Michael stood on the steps of the Ashford estate in Suickley Heights, the place that had always made him feel like an imposter, and rang the doorbell. Caroline answered. She looked tired, still. Beautiful, but tired in a way that expensive skincare and designer clothes couldn't hide. Her blonde hair was pulled back simply, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual polished outfits. Hi, she said softly. Hi, he's in the sunroom. I told him you were coming. He's been watching the window for the past hour. She led him through the house. It felt different now, less intimidating, maybe because Michael had nothing left to prove, into the sunroom where Ethan was playing with toy trucks on the carpet. When Ethan saw him, his face transformed. Daddy! He ran full speed across the room and launched himself into Michael's arms. Michael caught him, held him tight, breathed him in. Apple shampoo and graham crackers and innocence and love, and tears streamed down his face. I missed you so much, buddy, Michael whispered into his son's hair. So much. I missed you too. Where were you? Mommy said you were figuring stuff out. Did you figure it out? Michael pulled back to look at his son's face. Those bright eyes, Linda's eyes, full of trust and hope. I'm working on it, buddy. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and it takes time to fix them. But I want you to know something really important. None of this is your fault. And I love you more than anything in the whole entire world. That never changes. Even when you and Mommy are mad at each other. Even then. Especially then. Can you come home? Michael's heart shattered. Not yet. But we're going to see each other every week, I promise, every single Saturday, okay? Okay. Can Grandpa Robert come next time? Michael looked up at Caroline, who stood in the doorway watching them with an unreadable expression. We'll see, she said quietly. They spent the hour playing with trucks, building block towers, reading books about dinosaurs and construction vehicles. Ethan showed Michael every toy, every drawing, told him about preschool and his friends, and how he'd learned to write his name. Michael absorbed every word, every gesture, memorizing his son's laugh and the way he mispronounced excavator and the feeling of his small hand in his. When the hour was up, saying goodbye was agony. You'll come back next week? Ethan asked, holding Michael's hand tight. I promise, buddy, every Saturday. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. What are wild horses? Michael laughed through his tears. It means nothing could stop me. Nothing. After Ethan went upstairs with Patricia for a snack, Caroline and Michael stood in the foyer, an ocean of things unsaid between them. Thank you, Michael said, for letting me see him. I know you didn't have to. Caroline's eyes glistened. He's your son. I'm angry at you, Michael. I'm hurt. I feel betrayed, but I'm not cruel. Ethan needs his father. I'm sorry for all of it, for losing myself, for pushing you away, for... I don't want apologies, she interrupted, her voice tight. I've heard those before. I want to know if you're actually changing or if this is just temporary. Because Ethan needs stability. He needs a father who's present, who's real, not someone who's there physically but checked out mentally. I'm changing, Michael said. I quit my job. I'm staying with my dad. I'm in therapy. Or I will be. I have an appointment next week. I don't know if any of that matters to you. I don't know if it's enough, but I'm trying to find myself again." She studied his face for a long moment. "Who are you right now? Because I don't know if I recognize you." "I'm figuring that out," Michael said honestly. "But I know who I'm not. I'm not the person who turned his father away on Christmas Eve. I'm not the person who worked 80 hours a week for a company that didn't value him. I'm not the person who was so ashamed of where he came from that he forgot what actually matters." Caroline wiped her eyes. "I hope you find him, the real you, for Ethan's sake." She paused. "And maybe for ours." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a crack in the wall, and that was more than Michael had hoped for. Over the next 2 months, life developed a rhythm. Every Saturday Michael saw Ethan. The supervised visits became unsupervised. 1 hour became 3, then all day. They went to parks, to museums, to the zoo where Ethan loved the penguins, and Michael pretended to be scared of the tigers. Caroline started texting him about Ethan's day. Small things, nothing major, but communication nonetheless. A thaw. Michael started therapy with Dr. Patel, a calm woman in her 50s, who asked questions that made him uncomfortable and didn't accept surface-level answers. "You spent years building an identity based on what you thought others wanted you to be," she told him in their 4th session. "Now you have to do the harder work, figuring out who you actually are when no one's watching, when there's no one to impress, when there's no performance required." And every evening Michael came home, and it was home now, not just his father's house, to find Robert with dinner waiting. Nothing fancy. The kind of food Linda used to make. Spaghetti with garlic bread, grilled cheese with tomato soup, chili with cornbread. They ate together at the small kitchen table and talked. Really talked. About Linda. About the years after she died when Robert felt invisible, like a relic from a life Michael was trying to forget. "I thought you didn't need me anymore," Robert admitted one evening, his voice thick with emotion. "You had Caroline, the big house, the important job. You had this whole new life, and I figured I was just in the way. A reminder of where you came from that didn't fit where you were going." "Dad, I always needed you," Michael said, his own voice breaking. "I just didn't know how to admit it. I thought needing help made me weak. I thought admitting I was struggling meant I'd failed. I thought if I could just do everything on my own, prove I was strong enough, smart enough, successful enough, then I'd finally matter." "You always mattered," Robert said fiercely. "From the day you were born. You didn't have to prove anything, not to me, not to anyone. I wish I'd understood that sooner." "Well," Robert said, wiping his eyes, "you understand it now, that's what counts." In early March, Michael got a job, not at a corporation, not chasing status or climbing ladders, at a non-profit called Second Chances that worked with at-risk youth, kids aging out of foster care, kids with juvenile records, kids who needed someone to believe in them. The pay was half what he'd made before. The office was cramped, located in an old building in Homewood. There was no prestige, no status, no country club networking events. But Michael came home energized instead of drained. He came home feeling like what he did mattered. One evening he told his father about a 16-year-old kid named Marcus, who'd gotten expelled from school for fighting, but who Michael had gotten into a trade program learning carpentry. "He's got real talent, Dad. Natural instincts for the work. Reminds me of how I used to help you in the garage." Robert smiled. "You were pretty good with your hands, before you forgot." "I'm remembering," Michael said. "Slowly, but I'm remembering." In late March, Caroline sent a text. "Can we talk? In person. Just you and me." They met at a coffee shop in Squirrel Hill, neutral territory. Caroline looked different, softer somehow, less armored. "I've been thinking a lot," she said after they'd both gotten coffee and sat down at a corner table. "About us, about what went wrong, about whether there's anything left to save." Michael's heart pounded. "And? I don't know," she admitted. "But I think maybe we owe it to ourselves and to Ethan to at least try, to see if we can find our way back to each other, the real us, not the people we were pretending to be." "I want that," Michael said, "more than anything. I'm not promising it'll work. I'm not promising I can forgive everything or forget how much it hurt when you pushed me away, when you pushed everyone away. I know. But I see you changing. I see you trying. And I think—" She paused, her eyes filling. "I think the man I fell in love with is still in there somewhere. I'd like to find him again." "So would I," Michael whispered. They agreed to couples therapy, to taking things slow, to being honest even when it hurt. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better. It was real. Spring came to Pittsburgh the way it always did. Slowly, reluctantly, the winter releasing its grip one cold day at a time, until suddenly the trees budded and the rivers warmed, and the city came alive again. On a warm Sunday in late April, Michael received a text from Caroline that made him read it 3 times. "Ethan's 5th birthday party is next Sunday. I'd like you to come, and bring your father, if he wants to, if you think he'd like to." Michael showed the text to Robert, who read it with shaking hands. "She means it?" Robert whispered. "Yeah, Dad, she means it. Are you sure? I don't want to make things awkward. I don't want to—" "Dad," Michael interrupted gently, "Ethan's been asking about you. Caroline knows that. She wants you there. I want you there. Please come." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that, son. I'd like that very much." The next Sunday, Robert put on his best flannel shirt, the navy one Linda had bought him years ago that he'd only worn to church and funerals, and combed his grey hair carefully. Michael drove them to the Ashford estate, both of them nervous, both of them hopeful. The backyard had been transformed. Balloons, streamers, a bounce house, a table laden with food that probably cost more than Robert's monthly pension, children running everywhere shrieking, with the pure, unfiltered joy only children possess. When they walked through the gate, Ethan saw Robert and screamed, "Grandpa!" He ran full speed across the lawn and launched himself into Robert's arms. Robert caught him, held him tight, and openly wept. "Hey, little man," Robert managed through his tears. "Look at you, 5 years old already. When did you get so big?" "I'm 5 now. That's a whole hand. Look." Ethan held up his hand, fingers spread. "Do you like my party? Mom made it special." "It's the best party I've ever seen," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. Patricia and Gerald watched from the patio, their expressions unreadable, but not hostile. Caroline's sister Amanda nodded politely, but Caroline walked over, and when she reached Robert, she hugged him, brief but genuine. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Ethan's been talking about you for weeks. It means a lot, to all of us." Robert's voice was barely above a whisper. "Thank you for having me." They spent the afternoon in the backyard. Robert pushed Ethan on the swing set, helped him navigate the bounce house, watched him tear into presents with the explosive enthusiasm unique to 5-year-olds. Michael and Caroline sat together on the porch steps, not touching but together, watching. "This is nice," Caroline said softly. "Yeah," Michael agreed. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Scared we'll fall back into old patterns. Scared you'll forget again who you are and what matters. Scared I'll wake up one day and you'll be that stranger again." "I'm scared too," Michael said honestly, "but I'm not running from it anymore. I'm not pretending. Everything's fine when it's not. And I'm not shutting out the people who love me." She looked at him. "What changed? I mean really changed, not just surface stuff." Michael thought about it. "I hit bottom. I lost everything I thought defined me. The job, the house, the image. And when all that was stripped away, I found my dad's door still open. I found out that the person I'd been running from actually had what I'd been searching for all along, which was home, acceptance, love without conditions, the freedom to just be." Caroline's eyes glistened. "I'm not saying we're fixed. I'm not saying everything's okay. I know. But maybe we're heading in the right direction." Michael reached over and took her hand. She let him. "One day at a time," he said. "One day at a time," she agreed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Robert sat on a picnic bench, and Michael joined him. "You doing okay, Dad?" Robert smiled, watching Ethan play. "Yes, son, I'm real good. This is everything." "I've been thinking," Michael said, "about Christmas." Robert looked at him. "Next year we host it. You, me, Caroline, Ethan, at your place. Just us. The way it should be. The way it always should have been." Robert's throat tightened. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure. No country clubs. No performances. No pretending to be someone we're not. Just family. Just us." "I'd like that," Robert said, his voice breaking. "I'd really, really like that." They watched Ethan run across the lawn, clutching the toy fire truck Robert had brought that snowy Christmas Eve, the one that had sat unopened for months, the one that had finally found its way into Ethan's hands and heart. "Thanks for not giving up on me, Dad," Michael said quietly. "When I gave up on myself, when I closed that door, you could have walked away. You would have had every right." Robert put his hand on his son's shoulder, squeezed it tight. "Never," he said, fiercely. "Not once, not ever. You're my boy. Nothing changes that. Not distance, not time, not mistakes, nothing. That's what being a father means. That's what love means." Michael leaned into his father's shoulder, and they sat that way as the sun set, as the party wound down, as life moved forward. Later, as they drove home through the Pittsburgh streets, the city coming alive with evening light, the bridges illuminated, the rivers reflecting gold, Robert turned to Michael. "You did good today. Son, real good. We did good, Dad. Both of us." The road ahead was still uncertain. Caroline and Michael were rebuilding their marriage, one difficult, honest conversation at a time. They might make it, they might not, but they were trying with open eyes and honest hearts, and that counted for something. Robert would keep showing up, keep being present, keep being the father he'd always been, even when Michael couldn't see it, even when the door was closed. And Michael would keep learning to be himself again, not the person he thought he should be, not the image he thought he needed to project, but the person he actually was, flawed, real, enough. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to remember what actually matters. Sometimes the people you push away are the only ones who'll catch you when you fall. Sometimes the door you close is the one that needed to stay open all along. And sometimes, if you're incredibly lucky, you get a second chance to make things right, to come home. Not to a house, but to yourself. If this story touched your heart, share it. You never know who might need to hear about second chances, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son. Because every day someone is standing at a door they closed, wondering if it's too late to knock again. And the answer is always, it's never too late to come home.